Previously, we found out that Sumi's entire family had wanted her gone, and hence, even if Mr. Otonashi had not plotted her murder, one of their children sure would have. While we know exactly how Mr. Otonashi went about killing his wife, his family still doesn't. Let's see how Kotoko handles this assignment further. After such overwhelming reveals of intended crime, everyone is exhausted, and hence, they all decide to take a break and get some fresh air. Outside, Rion is speaking to her father, Ryoma, about everything that was confessed. He tells her that while he expected his and Susumu's plot to be revealed, he couldn't believe that Kaoruko was plotting something similar with Koya as well. He tells Rion that he just didn't want to talk about his crime himself, which is why he insisted that Rion took his place for the assignment. Ryoma explains that he did indeed hate his mother back when he plotted to kill her, but over the years, he has come to realize that she wasn't a horrible person, but instead a victim herself. Apparently, Sumi was just an obedient daughter accepting the orders of her father. She might have been responsible for the Otonashi group to flourish, but she did everything as per the wishes of her father. Every decision about her life, from who she should marry to how many children she should bear, and in what capacity they should work for the business, and even how these children should eventually marry. Every big and little thing was decided by Sumi's father beforehand. Hence, the only reason why she did not let any of her children do what they wanted was because she truly believed that what her father had planned for them was the only way they would all be happy. Ryoma tells Rion that the scariest part of this entire matter was that everything in reality also went exactly as per plan. The business was doing well, Sumi married a good man, and raised lovely children as well. By this time, Sumi was used to just obeying what had been outlined for her without questioning it. In fact, it was like she knew no other way to live her life, even if she knew that some things were wrong. Because her father had never been wrong before, Sumi did not have the courage or even the will to oppose him. After all, going against her father would mean going against everything that had been right in her life as well. Further explaining his understanding about Sumi, Ryoma goes on to say that she was lucky that she died when she did. Neither did she have to see the business crumbling, nor did she really have to see her children be miserable. Nonetheless, Ryoma accepts that none of this justifies that he planned to kill his own mother. He had to include Susumu in his plan since Susumu was better at seeing the big picture instead of just focusing on one thing like Ryoma believes himself to be. This is why Ryoma knew that leading a business was not something that he could do well himself. At this, Rion realizes that because Ryoma knew he could neither be successful nor happy if he agreed with his mother, he had the courage to fight for himself. Ryoma agrees with Rion and tells her that if any of them had found success adhering to their mother's plan, then they would have also become puppets like Sumi. Rion suddenly tells her father that she thinks she has cracked this assignment. Ooh! It will be exciting to know if Rion picked up Kotoko's hints and reached the conclusion Kotoko wanted her to reach. When everyone reconvenes in the evening, Rion announces that she has a fair idea of what might have gone down 23 years ago. She says that since everyone has an alibi, it has to mean that Sumi committed suicide. As far as false scenarios go, this makes sense. Somewhat. Susumu sees Rion's reasoning and agrees that if his mother knew that her family was plotting her death, then she could have thought it was the correct way to take matters into her own hands instead. Recalling that Ryoma said that Sumi's death happened at the right time, Rion continues her explanation for concluding that this was a suicide. She says that fearing damage to the reputation of the Otonashi group, Sumi's death had to be one that caused suspicions instead of being just a simple suicide. Painting the entire picture for the gathering, Rion states that Sumi must have carried no money that day on purpose to make it look like a robbery. Holding the knife through her jacket so as not to leave any fingerprints, Sumi must have screamed when she struck herself to get the attention of the people around. That way, nobody would think that this was a suicide, and it would be concluded that this was a robbery and murder instead. This kind of fits, doesn't it? If we didn't know the truth, this could easily have been a possible scenario. Smart as Rion is, her explanation doesn't stop here. When Susumu asks why Mr. Otonashi was insisting he was responsible for Sumi's murder, if it was actually a suicide, Rion cleverly answers that Mr. Otonashi could have manipulated Sumi into ending her life. She says that if Mr. Otonashi emotionally manipulated Sumi, then it is possible for him to feel the need to take responsibility for the consequences. Convinced that they've reached the right conclusion, Rion rightly states that if Mr. Otonashi would have directly told everyone about his involvement in Sumi's death, nobody would have believed him. Kotoko confirms whether Susumu and Koya agree with Rion's conclusion so that they can finally tell Mr. Otonashi the final answer the next day. Not wanting to fight over inheritance priority after being partially responsible for murder, everyone further agrees to let Mr. Otonashi decide the split up instead. After Rion narrates her solution to Mr. Otonashi the next day, he agrees that the conclusion they have managed to reach was perfect. Despite being unaware of their plans, he states that he was glad about having prevented the children from killing their mother by doing it himself instead. To everyone's shock, then, Mr. Otonashi proceeds to inform them about the progress of his malignant tumors, which will render him immobile in about 6 more months and eventually lead him to his death. Driving home his need to accept responsibility, he reminds everyone that a price has to be paid for every crime, and that a miserable death will be his price to pay. Mr. Otonashi then thanks Kotoko for all her help through the entire process. Kotoko, who had been mostly silent all this time, warns Mr. Otonashi that it might be too soon to thank her yet. She says that since Mr. Otonashi is relieved that he prevented his children from committing a crime, it seems like he has no regrets of the crime itself or the success that followed him and his children after the crime. To everyone's shock, Kotoko then announces that Sumi's death was indeed a murder and not a suicide. Say what now? Back when Kotoko tracked down the Yoko, Fubuki, she had realized that something was amiss in the way Sumi was killed. Upon probing, Fubuki had come clean and confessed to not having killed Sumi at all. Hold up, so there is something we do not know about this case after all? Clarifying that he didn't intend to deceive Mr. Otonashi, Fubuki narrated the entire incident as it actually happened. Having transformed into a stray dog himself, he planned to catch Sumi unawares and attack her in the presence of witnesses. But before he could do anything, someone else had stabbed Sumi, and after checking that she had died, stole her money and fled the scene. Fearing that his deal with Mr. Otonashi would go bad, Fubuki had used his powers to imitate Sumi to raise an alarm. Having seen the killer himself, Fubuki screamed in Sumi's voice and thereby protected the identity of the killer. He admitted to Kotoko that he purposely screamed out about the killer being a man, which can only mean that the killer was actually a woman. To the shocked audience at the hotel, Kotoko announces that it was Kaoruko who killed her mother. Speaking to Koya, Kotoko states that Mr. Otonashi had set this assignment to come clean about what he thought was his crime. She says that she felt the need to reveal the truth to everyone because of Mr. Otonashi's belief that every crime should receive its due punishment. Since Koya was content in letting Mr. Otonashi take the fall instead of confessing the truth, Kotoko took it upon herself to set things straight. An irritated Koya reminds Kotoko that she dismissed all of these theories herself earlier in the day. Seeing his mounting anger, Kotoko simply asks whether Kaoruko would have known to check Sumi's pulse to confirm her passing. While this startles Koya, Rion comes to the realization that Kotoko dropped fake hints on purpose to direct her toward a fake solution to the assignment so that Koya could be cornered into confessing. Oh, smart girl! A man at the end of his wits, Koya spills out in frustration that Kaoruko had confirmed that Sumi wasn't breathing anymore when she left the scene. It is only when Kotoko points it out to Koya that he realizes that the truth has slipped out. Kotoko then reports the entire truth to a visibly shaken and seemingly regretful Mr. Otonashi. She says that Kaoruko must have planned and executed the whole thing on her own 23 years ago, and now the fear of Mr. Otonashi's assignment may have pushed her to confess her crime to Koya. She solemnly informs him that once she leaves the hotel, she will never again speak of the information she has gained. Saying so, Kotoko and Kuro make to leave the hotel when they are stopped by Koya. Getting his gun out, he aims it at them, clearly intending to not let them leave with the ugly truth of the Otonashi clan. And here I thought we'd be done with this family. While Rion and Mr. Otonashi are stunned by the fact that Koya has a gun, Susumu attempts to knock some sense into him by reminding him that nobody outside that room was ever going to know about Kaoruko. Koya replies that he does indeed believe that the members of the Otonashi family will keep things under wraps, but that is also why he has no reason to have any such faith in Kotoko and Kuro. Well, dude's got a point. Kuro attempts to pacify Koya by guaranteeing that Kotoko truly has no intentions of doing anything about Kaoruko's truth. He continues walking towards Koya, but not only does he not lower the gun, he even fires it at Kuro's head. Oh goodness, the fun has just begun. Falling backwards, Kuro lies motionless. Having eliminated one threat, Koya moves on to Kotoko next. With the gun aimed at Kotoko, Koya is left dumbstruck when our ever-reincarnating hero gets up and stops him. When Koya tries to make sense of what just happened, Kotoko requests them all to think of Kuro and herself as beings from a daydream, to whom the rules of reality do not apply. Repeating herself again, she assures them all that she does not wish to cause any harm to the Otonashi group and finally leaves with Kuro. A fortnight later, Rion is thinking about how her aunt, Kaoruko, had tried to take her own life out of shame and guilt the day after the truth was revealed. She was only saved because Koya got there in time and quickly got her hospitalized. Visiting her father at his restaurant, Rion is surprised to see that her uncle, Susumu, was there as well. Something good out of this mess, thankfully. As per Susumu, Koya is ensuring that Kaoruko recovers soon, but their father is fighting a losing battle with his own health. Meanwhile, Kotoko and Kuro are at Mr. Otonashi's bedside upon being called to his place. Mr. Otonashi tells them that he has something to clarify. Speaking to Kuro, Mr. Otonashi asks whether he was indeed Rika's cousin. How does this old man know about Rika? It so happened that Mr. Otonashi had asked to meet this immortal woman who could see the future out of curiosity. Meeting her when she was in the hospital, he recalls her inhuman beauty. Additionally, he says that he saw her in town a couple of months ago. In town? Rika? Without telling her about the actual murder, Mr. Otonashi had simply asked for her help in redeeming himself. At this, Rika had apparently suggested that Mr. Otonashi seek her cousin and Kotoko's help. So, Mr. Otonashi went looking for Kotoko because of Rika. Ah! Okay. Outside Mr. Otonashi's room, Kotoko and Kuro discuss why Rika must have sent Mr. Otonashi their way. As per Kuro, this entire case was either a distraction to conceal what Rika was planning next, or Rika was hopeful that Kuro would be able to see Kotoko's extreme reactions to when humans are involved with the supernatural. Rika's objective always remains the same. She just wants Kuro to be as far away from Kotoko as possible. But alas, it never happens. A few days later, Kotoko is at an unagi restaurant where two onlookers are trying hard not to be mesmerized by her. So, Kajio lost his wife tragically 6 months ago, and he has just recently begun to feel like himself. This is why he decided to invite his good friend Jujoji over to have a meal with him. Both of them theorize about what someone who looks as young as Kotoko is doing at an upscale unagi restaurant on her own. While it seems like that will remain a mystery for them, Jujoji decides to confront his friend about the truth of his wife's death. Without going around in circles, he directly asks Kajio whether he killed his wife. Gosh, more murder? Deflecting the question, Kajio continues to wonder about the mystery that is Kotoko. He then asks Jujoji what made him reach such a conclusion. Jujoji replies that there weren't any witnesses to the mugging and eventual death of Kajio's wife. He further explains that Kajio had become increasingly possessive of his wife, which could easily translate into murderous thoughts just to keep her to himself. Additionally, Jujoji also mentions that Kajio was surely not the kind of person to let himself suffer for the death of his wife. He fully expected Kajio to be on the lookout for the reason of his wife's death. Instead, Kajio ended up feeling heavy-hearted with deteriorating health and lost sleep. This, as per Jujoji, was completely out of character for Kajio. But then he suddenly bows to Kajio in apology and concludes that because Kajio wasn't shocked about the murder accusation and the fact that he was able to continue his meal peacefully, he must not be the killer. Well, that was fast and a bit weird too, don't you think? After their meal, Kajio and Jujoji go their respective ways. Just then, Kotoko catches up with Kajio and introduces himself. Already intrigued by her, Kajio is truly shocked when she asks him whether he was on his way to turn himself in. This question causes him to think of everything that has happened in his life since his decision of killing his wife. Whoa! He recalls how 6 months ago he decided to end her life for the sole reason to keep her to himself. While his plan to mug her and then kill her went ahead without a hitch, trouble started when he began feeling heavy and sleep deserted him. His condition did not improve till the time he thought that accepting his crime would make things better. In fact, he met Jujoji with the intention of it being a last meal with his friend. Oh, I knew it! And so did Kotoko, it seems, because she informs Kajio that his wife has been strongly clinging to him and possessing him ever since her death. When the ghost of Kajio's wife explained the entire story to Kotoko at the Unagi restaurant, she requested Kotoko to pass on a message to her husband as well. Even as a spirit, Kajio's wife has no intention of letting Kajio live his life in peace because he is a heartless person, incapable of feeling any guilt whatsoever. Scared about the options he has left, Kajio appeals to Kotoko to exorcise his wife in return for money. She crisply warns him that as the goddess of wisdom to supernatural beings, she is under no obligation to help humans. Saying so, she goes on her way to meet Kuro. And that has been the second season with the beloved Kotoko. Feel free to join me in endlessly waiting for another season.